There are three things you can do to help us out.
One, you can make sure you subscribe to this channel.
Two is you can leave a comment here or on Apple Podcasts.
And three, if you really want to help, you can follow this link to see how you could be a supporter on Patreon.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Welcome to another edition of Word in Your Attic, where we're joined by the author and the Times music critic, and someone who always looks very comfortingly to us as though he's just strolled in off the cover of Blonde on Blonde, or possibly a Mark Bolan album from 1971. It's the great Will Hodgkinson. Will, lovely to see you.
Lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Are you actually cross-legged and sitting on an embroidered rug?
I'm cross-legged. I am cross-legged in this little room where you can see the records behind.
Yeah.
We don't exactly have a sofa. We've got a sort of flat thing. So it is a bit of a crash pad, you know.
Flat thing. Already we've been teleported back.
Exactly. So yeah, it's there's a lot of cushions, and
yeah.
I would like to be burning incense, but it's a bit early for that. And you know, I might be listening to the heavy sounds of Juicy Lucy later on. Who knows?
The heavy sounds. That's perfect. Well, you're among friends.
Okay,
perfect.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Lovely to see you. And how is life? How's life been in the last during the unpleasantness? All right, you've been, capable of carrying on, really.
Capable, yes. It was, if I'm going to be honest with you, not suited to lockdown, not suited to my character, and certainly not suited to my job, which involves going to gigs all the time. Very stressful. I think a lot of people enjoyed it. I didn't. I was very worried. But feeling very positive now. Feeling good. Getting out of it. Feeling very raring to go. And just trying to get on with things, and so
are you going to gigs again?
I went to see the night before last I went to see Wet Leg. Have you heard of them?
I read the thing you wrote about them.
So that was good fun.
You said it's a terrible name.
Terrible name, exactly. But in a way, I was thinking about this. The Arctic Monkeys, the Beatles. Is that a good name?
Terrible name.
Oh, terrible. Well, I think the Beatles the worst name.
No,
ever.
To be fair, not as bad as Wet Leg. Actually.
Wet Leg's pretty bad.
But anyway, it's a little bit. If you choose a name like that, you're taking it on the chin at the outset, aren't you? Really,
you definitely are. There's a jokiness to them, but that was what I liked because I don't know how you felt, but the lockdown was so serious. I mean, if I had another person telling me to stay safe, I was going to, kill people. So it was really good to have a fun band, like a fun rock and roll band. Basically, that's what they are. They're
very good. Where were they on?
100 Club, perfect place.
Oh right, fantastic. Okay. So, have you got a full diary of gigs?
It's just beginning. What's happened is that there's still a lot of cancellations because one person in the team gets COVID and you don't have the insurance. So there's lots and lots of cancellations, but things are beginning to come back, and you sort of sense it. You know how you get the mood of things, and you sort of sense that things are becoming a bit more robust. So they're beginning. I mean, I'm going to see Echo and the Bunnymen on Monday, so that'd be fun.
So is it the bigger things that are getting called off and postponed because they're things that got a big crew, whereas if it's somebody in a pub, they're probably not.
Yeah, I think so, and it's really hard. I mean, what I think the worst, and it's always been, those bands who when they're all young and they probably still live with their mum and dad, it's great. They can play local places, go, and it's fine. They get to a certain level and they're kind of making a living from it. Then they need to get a crew. They're not on the big level where they're really making a living from it. They might get up to Shepherd's Bush Empire or something like that. When those bands hit, they've got their first tour of America. That's really hard.
Oh, it must be terrible.
They can't make a living,
No, it's so hard. Because also, if you're at that level, if you're at the kind of Shepherd's Bush Empire level, you're often losing money on a tour anyway.
Exactly.
The way you're paying for it is by doing 2 or 3 choice support slots for some much bigger band at an arena or whatever.
Festival,
so the whole thing's really precarious.
But I suppose also you're just losing years of your life that you won't get back. Will you? You won't be 23 again, will you?
Never gonna happen again.
And there'll be new 23-year-old bands coming along by the time you come back and you're 25, 26 or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a gloomy topic.
That's a gloomy topic. Look, on which note, let's teleport you back, Will, to your early days in, I can't remember, was it Newcastle on Tyne? Where did you grow up? I can't remember.
Born in Newcastle on Tyne, grew up in Richmond.
Oh, right.
and grew up in so parents was of the generation who were kind of grammar school generation, I suppose. Working class people, first to go to university in their family, that kind of thing. Got out, came to Richmond, became journalists, was earning good money, which is now a laugh to me,
Yes.
Yeah.
Comparison. But so we had a very comfortable life. I mean, we were middle class. We lived in a suburban semi on the outskirts of Richmond. We had a Volvo in the drive. My parents would go to buy, Edwardiana on a Sunday. It'd be that kind of
Edwardiana. That's a brilliant expression.
And but also they were, to try and give you the picture, they're quite straight. They weren't hippie-ish or anything. But my dad would have a few nice records. I remember Teaser and the Firecat. We used to love listening to Moonshadow.
Yes.
What it would really be like to lose your eyes and lose your hands. I thought that sounded pretty bad to me, but mind. So that was the early days.
What sort of record player was there in the house? Can you remember that?
Yeah, vaguely. It was one of those ones where it was a kind of cabinet. I think the records were on one side, and there wouldn't be loads. It's not like the wall behind you, David. But there'd be a few, and there would be a sort of, I seem to remember brown speakers, and one of those kind of record, sort of long and flat record players with a plastic lid.
Yeah. Smoked glass, probably.
Smoked glass, that was it.
Yeah.
And very careful. There was a sort of not a cloth as such, but a sort of pad that you had to run the pad along. You turn the record player on, you put the pad on, and it went round and it clicked.
Shall I tell you what that
Emitex?
was? No. Shall I tell you what that was? Let's all just recognize this. It's important. We've done hundreds of these. This is the first time anybody has remembered the dust bug.
Dust bug.
Dust bug.
It was kind of like a piece of
little
velvet,
wheel,
wasn't it?
It was like a tone arm on a plastic arm, and then a little piece of velvet on a roller, which you would put on the record, and it would gather the dust. And then when you finish, you just took the dust off.
Little tiny bristles at the front, if I remember right.
Well, sometimes a
to
roller,
keep it in the groove, and it would run through the whole record.
Bug. Do they still make dust bugs? We want to know. But anyway, carry on.
Dust bug. So I've actually, because I was quite excited about this, I've got to say. Yeah. So I have pulled out a few records.
Oh, good. What you got?
Well, this was one that was, hang on a sec. Oh dear. Hang on, I'm just going to find it.
Yeah.
Are you alphabetical or genre?
No, well, just kind of all over the place.
Oh, right. Okay.
So like I said, my parents were quite straight, but they did have this.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
I was, as a child, I just remember being so fascinated by this. I mean, she seemed glamorous to the point of scary.
Yeah.
If I ever met someone like that, she's, some kind of witch glamours on or something, that's terrifying.
Foxtress.
Yeah.
Then you look, can you see?
Oh, we certainly can. It's wonderful.
So
wonderful.
I thought, who's she?
Brian Eno.
Yes.
Like, who is that?
Lovely girl.
Yeah. And, why has he got green hair?
Yeah.
What's going is that I'm not sure, about
Paul Thompson.
Didn't quite fit.
It didn't quite fit.
Yeah. Could do better. See
Great
me.
drummer, but never looks comfortable.
Never look like Woody Woodmansey. Yeah.
So this would really fascinate me.
Right.
This would just be, the music to me was hard to quantify. I mean, this is when I'm, 5 or 6.
Right.
I couldn't really work it out. I remember listening to it and just thinking, this is such a strange world. Are these adults? They don't look like my adult parents.
Right.
But I'm sure I didn't see them in Richmond, these kinds of people.
I think you're belonging to you're turning out to be a member of that. We've got quite a cohort of people amongst our interviewees who confess that their first memories of pop music is finding it vaguely frightening.
Absolutely.
Oh, very much so.
It's the adult world disturbing, impossible to compute.
No, it's true. I mean, so I remember when I saw Kate Bush on doing Wuthering Heights, obviously, and the following day in school, everyone was kind of dancing, like spinning around the playground. And I remember thinking, she really is scary. I've never heard anyone sound like that, but I also might fancy her a little bit. But I didn't really understand it.
How old would you have been then when Kate Bush was happening? Was it 78? I can't remember now. Yeah.
I'd be 8 then, yeah. So I would have. So it would be in the very earliest stirrings. What
stirrings.
Yes.
We used to call it the FF, the faint feeling.
It's such a pity it can't bring back music magazines. Just have a column called Stirrings. That'd be
Stirrings.
where people talk about their early erotic fixations on pop stars.
Faint feeling is absolutely brilliant.
We got the FF.
So good.
Yeah.
There'll be members of kind of Bucks Fees and stuff in there.
Exactly.
Can you remember when you first bought a record for yourself?
Yeah, I can. And again, I pulled it out.
Go on.
So my brother, who's very well, I like my brother.
We had him on this podcast just a couple of weeks ago.
I heard him, and he was going, "Yeah, Will thought he was really cool. He had the collected works of ELO." Well, that wasn't entirely true. I did have this.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
That wasn't the first record I ever bought, but I remember thinking I did like ELO because it's all space age, you know.
Yeah.
So I like that, but actually, this was the first record I bought, and this I still love actually. And this is another record.
Yeah.
Another one that really, really fascinated me. I mean, because I didn't, obviously it was, remember how hard it was to get information in those days. So I assumed that was the lead singer. I didn't know.
Oh, that's extraordinary. Yeah.
This is a scene from, Northern Irish.
Yeah, it's the expulsion in Belfast, isn't it? Exactly.
I didn't know that though.
Yeah.
And then I'd listen to these lyrics and I'd think, who's Brendan Behan? Who's, there's a lot of Brendan Behan. Who's Oscar Wilde? I think I'd heard mentioned Sean O'Casey, Samuel Beckett, Eugene O'Neill, Edna O'Brien, and Lawrence Stern. Are they rock stars? I didn't know who they were.
You should have been reading Smash Hits, Will you not?
We would have explained.
We would have explained this.
We're very educational.
Did you go on? But it was a little bit later. I mean, this was 1980, so I was 10.
Right.
And it really, really stands up as well. I mean, it's an incredible record.
Yeah.
When you don't have, it's quite nice when you're young because you don't have the context for everything. So I didn't know what Northern Soul was. I certainly didn't know who Geno Washington was. And so you had this record, and also he sounded so hysterical. He sounded like he was on the verge of tears the entire time, so passionate. Yeah. So that really made a big impact on me, that record. Absolutely.
Right. And where did you buy them? Can you remember where you went to buy records?
Yeah.
Richmond, there must be loads of places.
There's a couple of places. There's Harlequin Records.
Oh, of course.
And I remember going in there, and the first single I bought actually was Nights in White Satin by the Dickies on white.
Oh my God, the Dickies! Oh, has that stood the test of time?
Well, I mean, I haven't. God knows, I lost it many years ago. But I remember going in there, and I had a cousin who was a punk. Now, don't forget, this is suburbia. So punks, punk got to suburbia in around 78, 79. They weren't hanging out at the Roxy in 76. So anyway, he played me the Sex Pistols and all this different stuff. And the one I really liked was the Dickies because they had the Banana Splits theme.
Banana Splits theme. I was sent on the road with them by the NME. I must have done something wrong. It was a punishment. Oh, God. They were kind of cartoon middle-class punk band, weren't they, from the West Coast, I think?
That's right. A kind of more cartoony Ramones, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, this is amazing. This is so good. And, bear in mind, this is pre-Dexys. So this is what I would have been 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And I went into Harlequin Records. I was very nervous. I went upstairs and I said, "Excuse me, have you got the single by the Dickies?" And in the way that only people who work at record shops can, bear in mind I was a child, I was 8. The new one or the old one?
This is it. I mean, now that record shops have all gone, pretty much. Yeah. You do think that there ought to be a kind of national day where everybody who ever worked at a record shop ought to come out into the public square and go, "We're sorry.
Yeah.
We were so patronising."
Isn't it incredible? Someone who couldn't form a relationship with this shop and be coming for years, and we can make them feel welcome and part of the community. It's so supercilious.
Absolutely.
And kind of patronising.
It's like,
a boy of 8.
Absolutely.
I maintain that the Jack Black character in High Fidelity is absolutely nailed it. It's so true. We've talked about this many times on these pods, but it's right, isn't it? That he just doesn't feel like selling that particular record this
He
time.
doesn't feel it. But, you know, I loved all that. And that really started it for me. I wanted to be in that world. I was fascinated by that world. It was so exciting. You know, they seemed... this world of music, you know, it wasn't just the music, as you know, it was like, well, it was a mandolier looking like, you know, dominatrix on.
Yeah.
I just got absolutely fascinated from then on, and it never left me.
Who did you go and see first? Can you remember?
Yeah, I can. It was my mum took me. It was Bow Wow Wow.
Oh, fantastic!
My mum took me to Bow Wow.
Another group I went on the road with. They were really good. I thought they were great, Bow Wow.
Oh my god!
They did a great version of "Fools Rush In." Do you remember that?
Fools Rush In, yeah.
They did.
They did a thing called. So I don't know if Tom told you the story, but we went to. It was an art college. It was about 1980.
Yeah.
And my mum was interviewing them because she worked as a tabloid journalist. I can't remember who for then, but anyway, she was interviewing them. They were in the news because Annabella Lewin was 14. Malcolm McLaren, this is something that gets forgotten about. Malcolm McLaren wanted to do, it's pretty dodgy, he wanted to do a soft porn magazine.
Yeah, yes, he did. Called Chicken. No, not Chicken.
Yes, it was.
It was Chicken, wasn't it? That's right, yeah.
The idea is it was for kids, like, and we met him, and he was wearing a long overcoat, and he was really lugubrious and scary. And he gave me and Tom a copy of a tape called Your Cassette Pet, which came.
Yeah. I've still got mine. Yeah.
Oh God, I wish I still had mine. I had it for years. Anyway, I loved Louis XIV's. I thought it was really good. But anyway, we were so all of this was new to me. Obviously, I was 10. It seemed quite scary. I think people were probably just sort of dancing about in the way they do at any other gig. But I remember being quite scared and intimidated. And we were there when my mum was interviewing the band, and you know those interviews. I mean,
and they were intimidating too. My God,
they were awful. So
Matthew Ashman, their incredible hair, Barossa,
really, and they were really rude. And I remember
really rude.
Yeah, and they had all these hangers on, and one punky woman said to my mum, who was wearing a fur coat, "Can I have your fur coat?" And my mum went, just like said no and ignored her, and the woman stuck her tongue out at her, and I was thinking, wow. These people are so rude and unpleasant, Again, fascinating.
It's the idea of going with your mum to see Bow Wow Wow and your mum's wearing a fur coat.
Yeah.
This is talk about a disappeared world.
Yeah. Smoking, everyone's smoking.
Yes.
But let me tell you the first gig. Can I tell you the first gig that I didn't manage to get into on my own?
Oh, go on.
Yeah, go on.
That was very important. And again, I pulled out the record.
Right. We want to see it, as Huey Green would have said.
This band, they're called the Stingrays.
Oh, yeah.
And they were a garage psychobilly band. You remember that whole thing?
I remember the thing. I don't remember them, but go on. Yeah.
Okay, so this would have been, there's a place called the Clarendon in Hammersmith.
Yeah.
And it had a basement, and the basement was really, really dingy. And I was 13, and I went down and I discovered all these bands, and I got to credit Tom here because he got into the Cramps and stuff like that, and it's quite cartoonish and exciting, when you're that age. And so anyway, the Stingrays were playing, and I tried to look old. I remember that was the main thing I was trying to do. I didn't have a flat top, which is the hairstyle you meant to have, but I'd kind of got some Boots Firm Hold hairspray and got my curls kind of quiff and tried to look hard, which is really hard for me, especially as a 13-year-old. And there are all these people who look like these people, they can't have homes. They can't be people with mums and dads. They just can't. It's just not possible. Do you know what I mean? They're just too cool for having to have mums and dads.
Yeah.
So there I was waiting in the queue. And who I later found out, the guy at the door was a guy called Mike Spencer, who was in a band called the Cannibals, and also the Count Bishops, a pub rock band.
I remember them. Yeah.
Yep. And he just went, "No way, you 18." And then I went back up outside, and I got a glimpse, because you went down the stairs and you saw this band at the far corner. And I think the Stingrays had already come on by then. And I saw this kind of crazy psychobilly jumping about and all these cool looking people. And I just thought, oh God, look at that magical world.
And you couldn't go in.
Back on the tube to Richmond.
It's the perfect gig experience.
It was life changing.
That is, because I'm sure you imagine to be far more fantastic than it would have been if you'd been on the inside.
Oh, it was incredible.
That's brilliant.
It was far more exciting than it ever could have been. Of course, I was massively disappointed, but at the same time, I was just like, oh, let me in. And then after that, the gig I did get into was at the Clarendon, Doctor and the Medics.
Oh, right.
Supported by, who then, this is way before Spirit in the Sky, they were quite a fun psychedelic band, and supported by the Scientists, who are great, a sort of garage band, and a band called The Prisoners, who are sort of psychedelic kind of mod revival. And that was amazing, absolutely amazing. I mean, it was so exciting, you know, it was just, just the whole thing again, you know. And the other thing I noticed, and this was very much an 80s thing, is that you would have mods and you'd have punks and you'd have psychobillies. Sometimes they might fight each other, but they were, because everything was so small, and it was the 60s revival as well, which is the thing I really got into later on. You know, you have a look at the mods and the kind of psychedelic mods. They were all there because it was too small for them to have their own scenes. There's only about 12 in London. You know, there's only a handful of people who into the 30th floor elevators, you know, had sort of bowl cuts and everything. You know, the perfect Brian Jones cut. So they were all there together.
Sort of tense cohabitation of all these different sects.
That's probably really true. It's a bit like we often reminisce about, you know, in the 70s and 80s. If you're driving anywhere in Britain, you would drive through a small, and most of Britain is not towns or cities. It's small places. It's kind of villages and places between villages and towns. And they've all got a war memorial and the centre. And then when you used to drive past these places on a summer evening, there would always be all the teenagers in the village.
There'd be one
sitting on the war memorial.
There'd be one punk. There'd be one mod reviver. There'd be a kind of a heavy metal kid, and they're all sitting there sharing a can of Kestrel and some Benson Hedges. Always. And they're meant to be fighting. If they were in a big city, they'd be fighting. But they were kind of stuck together because that's all they had.
They were the ones who didn't fit in. And also, do you remember every single town had one Robert Smith?
Yes, they did.
It's amazing. That's
yeah.
Every single town.
I always think it's a great truth of letters pages. You can always tell if a letters page has been made up because all the letters come from cities, and nobody ever comes from cities. People actually come from little places called Stonies.
But also, the people who came from cities weren't necessarily the ones who wrote. The people who wrote were the only Robert Smith in the village.
Absolutely.
That was the one who kind of felt really left out and just wanted to be in touch with something.
That's why at Smash Hits, Steve Bush, who was the art director, always used to say, this magazine is done for my sister called Tracy, and she lives in a place called Gainsborough in Lincolnshire. And that summed it up absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
So what else you got to show us? What else you got out there?
Well, so in the Clarendon, after discovering those bands like the Stingrays, who are fun but not very good, really, to be honest. But I didn't know, you know what I mean? To me, they're amazing, but, you know, they don't stand up on record. I saw this band, and it was downstairs again, this tiny little basement. They were actually supporting the Primitives, if you remember them.
Yeah.
And this was when I really started discovering Nuggets bands, 60s garage bands, you know, the Seeds, the 13th Floor, all that stuff, and I really loved it. And this band came on who were sort of like that, but very different. They all had bowl cuts. They had these kind of sparkly tops, and they're singing these very bizarre songs. And it was this band who went on to great.
Oh God!
Oh right,
yes,
yeah.
My Bloody Valentine. This was they had a singer called Dave Conway here who left, and then they became the life-changing band that, you know, invented shoegazing and everything else. But at this time, they were kind of a garage
and known for their terrifyingly ear-bleedingly high volume, weren't they?
Exactly. All of it later. You know, they were really, really good fun. And anyway, I kind of
My Bloody Valentine was good fun. That was hard to work out.
Oh no, that's the thing, because they were. I mean, We're So Beautiful, you know, A Lovely Sweet Darling, and they had crazy songs about, and they turned out to be about kind of very quite sick subjects, because David Conway was into gore and horror. But anyway, so from there, you could say I got my entry into journalism, because I really got into all this stuff. And I guess it was the indie mid 80s to late 80s. There's indie and the 60s stuff all kind of colliding. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to do a fanzine? So when I was 17, I did a fanzine, and yes, I do have
Oh,
Good, good.
We want to see it.
Here it is. It's called Make It in Ongar.
Oh, that's great.
It cost 50p, but I've actually crossed it out to 30p, so I obviously wasn't doing very well.
Yeah.
Discount.
So the interviews I got, and this was, you know, I was 17 when I did this.
Yeah.
I got interviews with Primal Scream, and
Oh, that's so good.
yeah, I mean they weren't very famous then. My Bloody Valentine. So I was reading this the other day when I was thinking about doing this. I pulled it out, and I was just looking at some of the questions that I asked My Bloody Valentine, and it's a miracle that you didn't employ me for Smash Hits and various other places. When you see the quality of my questions,
Go on.
Okay, so start off, you know, we said things like, okay, what were your childhoods like? Boring, even more boring than his. What are your hobbies? Sleeping and watching TV. That's Kevin Shields. And then Colmo Kosig says, I'm generally too ill to do anything else. I love trashy films because I always feel I can make one myself. And it goes on. And then I start saying, what about food? And then this is where it gets really good.
These are great questions.
No, it gets worse.
I know, they're good.
Have you ever lit your own farts?
This is good.
Yeah. Kevin, no, I've never heard of that before. I'm scared of burning my trousers. And now this is me telling this story. I once read this story of a man who was trying to make a cow healthy, and this cow had very severe gastric problems. The vet tested its fart, which the cow had been brewing up all day. The bloke put a match to the cow's bum, and the subsequent flame was so big that it killed him and burned the whole barn down. Then they answered by saying, we once saw a cow explode. And
that's because it was worth it.
Yeah.
I love the idea that you've taken over this interview, age 70, to tell a hilarious story. You know,
story.
It's bound to be better than tell us about your new album, isn't it?
Completely.
Really?
Well, I mean, that was the thing. I mean, I had a child's mind. Do you know what I mean? And so I was kind of thinking these things, you know, like. And then another question: say, would you say you were healthy people?
Yeah.
Not at all. I mean, it's all things like that. None of them are kind of, you know, the questions that I've since learned to ask. So it's yeah.
So what have you learned to ask? What's your never fails question?
Oh, God knows. I don't know. These days, what I hope for is to have a conversation, you know, to try and kind of keep it going, and then have a list of things in my mind. But sometimes, you know, it goes wrong, and we've all known those interviews. And so the other day, I did an interview with Brian Wilson. Now, you must have interviewed him in the past.
Yeah, I read your piece. It was absolutely. I can't remember now what the longest sentence he came up with was. It was something extraordinary. What was it?
Can I have a glass of water?
That's right. Can I have a glass of water? That was a pull quote, wasn't it? Yeah.
A pull quote.
So you got a pretty clear idea of what it was about.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I don't know if you know, and this is the thing. I've now been doing this for 20 years or so, but I still feel when an interview goes like that, I still feel that I've really failed at my job and I can't do it correctly. I don't know what I'm doing, and it's a disaster. I still get that feeling, you know. And then, of course, the reality is that Brian Wilson shouldn't really. Brian Wilson's God to me, but he shouldn't really be put in front of journalists.
No, you shouldn't.
Absolutely.
I quite agree.
95% of musicians should never go near a journalist at all because they haven't really got an awful lot to say about what they do. Some of them do.
Yeah.
But they're the exception. But now I've not read this piece. I'll go back and read it because the thought going through my mind is Brian Wilson has no doubt got nothing to say. But were you meeting Brian Wilson? Were you actually in the same place as Brian Wilson, or was this done via Zoom?
Zoom. I mean, I've interviewed Brian Wilson three times now. Okay. The first time was actually quite good. It was with Van Dyke Parks, and we went to
Van Dyke Parks.
Who did all the talking?
Yes.
Talking. And also, but you'd known him for 50
years.
Yeah, but that was all right. Brian Wilson is, I mean, he's schizophrenic. You know, it's not someone who can just sit there and chat. You know what I mean? But you know, out of that genius came this incredible music. So it's you with situations like that, I suppose you start wondering about the role of the journalist. You know, and I love music journalism, and I love the storytelling aspect of it. And I think so with someone like Brian Wilson, I don't know how you feel about this, but it's not your role to kind of, you know, the interview is not the thing in a way.
No, it's not.
The experience is the thing. You know,
it's the meeting.
A lot of it's just
the
being
thing
in the room
It's the
with them.
thing when you go back to the office, when we used to work in offices years ago,
Yeah.
particularly the Smash Hits office or whatever. You come back from interviewing anybody, and everybody in the office would just stop, saying, "What would they like?"
And all they want to know
And it's
was,
what you told them in the first 2 minutes
Yeah.
was always the thing that had to be in the story.
yeah, it
That's
was
the
what
stuff
they were
that strikes
wearing,
you.
their
Yeah.
mannerisms, it's the cigarettes they smoked. It was something they said kind of off microphone to someone who,
Yeah.
or their phone would go and they'd suddenly have a conversation with somebody. That's the revealing stuff.
Yeah, it's the thing.
Otherwise, they're trotting out to you probably what they trotted out to the Daily Express 10 minutes beforehand. And,
especially if you're doing it, those ones where you're in a hotel room and it's you've got half an hour with an American star. I mean, Yeah. So it's So that's
we ought to just on the interview front. It's an obvious question, but the great interviews that you've done, the ones that people who really were unlike how you'd imagined, or anybody particularly impressive.
Yeah, I think the most difficult experience I've ever had, but also in a way the most rewarding was Prince. And again, I mean, this was for, I've got it here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So this was for Mojo.
Yeah.
This was just not long before he died, actually.
Yeah.
It's 2014. So it was in. It's on the Turks and Caicos Islands. So it's extremely glamorous. As you can imagine with Prince, there's a million cancellations beforehand, moving around. And it really seemed like it's going to be on Christmas Day. And I thought, he's a Jehovah's Witness. He doesn't celebrate Christmas. He could actually torture me like that because,
Yeah.
In the end, I think it happened on January the 2nd, and I flew out on the 1st. All very last minute. No information. Didn't seem to be a PR or a manager. It was all very confusing. And got there from huge, really long flight, flying to Miami, and got to Turks and Caicos. Turned my phone on, text message, Prince will see you now. Oh my God!
Fantastic.
And then there's another. The messages start coming through. So, don't worry, go to your hotel. We'll call you when we're ready for you. It's like, okay, fine. So I went back, tried to get some sleep, didn't really get any sleep. To this hotel, very nice hotel, all the rest of it. And then Prince will be ready at 12 o'clock, be waiting at the lobby. 12 o'clock, nothing comes until 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, a car comes, I get in, takes me off, and it stops, I'm not joking, by a shrub in the middle of nowhere. Like the road stops and there's just like a dusty path, and the guy goes, get out. And I go, what, here? And he said, yeah, that's what I've been told. So I'm standing here in the middle of nowhere in the Turks and Caicos Islands. Then this hippie in a golf buggy turns up, went, hi, I'm Prince's manager. I went, really? You look about 21. And he's like this young kind of surfer dude. He went, hop in. So it's like, okay, fine. Go in, get driven to this place. If places are incredibly expensive, the inside is outside and the outside is inside. So inside is like water and, sort of where you go swimming or whatever. Outside is furniture. That seems to be how they do it if they're really, really
Really
Yeah.
So there we go. And no sign of Prince. His band turn up. There's these three women called Third Eye Girl. Do that interview. That's fine. They tell me about Prince and they tell me about how they never know what's going on. They get the call last minute, the whole thing. Good interview. And then I'm told to go back to the hotel. So I go back and told to wait and said, right, now at midnight, a car's going to come for you. And I think a car finally comes about 1 or 2 in the morning. Same thing, hippie in the golf buggy, turn up, and I'm waiting. And then Prince arrives, and he's wearing a white Maharaja's, like a white Maharaja's outfit, a white turban, and white high heel stilettos. Got this incredibly beautiful girl next to him who never says a word, but he's by his side the entire time. No introduction. And he said something like, he gave me this kind of sly look and said, heard you had a nice chat with the girls. And I thought, he was listening in. He had a camera. He was watching the whole thing. And if it went badly, I'd be sent back to
Yeah.
And I wasn't allowed to tape it.
That's right.
I wasn't allowed to take notes. I had to remember it. I wasn't allowed.
Which is self-defeating.
Yeah, but
completely self-defeating. You're more likely to miss.
Yeah, but it's also creating mystery, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So the interview, from what I can remember, once it got oh, that's right. He played me his album, his new album, which wasn't great really, but he he sat me in this chair, and he sat opposite me quite a long distance, and he was just like this the entire time. And I was like listening to it going,
furiously tapping a toe, trying to whistle. Yeah. Break dancing at one point.
That's the single.
Spinning up the back of your neck.
Oh, that's another single.
Yeah.
And so then the interview.
You've done it again.
Yeah, it was terrifying. But then, and we talked for quite a long time after that, a couple of hours, and he talked a lot about racism in the music industry. I remember him saying black people don't get second chances. If Leonardo DiCaprio can make 10 bad movies in a row, if Chris Rock makes a bad movie, he's out. I thought, God, that's so true. All this different stuff, very obviously incredibly bright. And then he just disappeared. And that was it. It didn't say goodbye. He's like, you disintegrated, whatever,
Yeah.
So that was really, really fascinating. I mean, that was.
So he gave you lots to write about, didn't he? Which is the main point, isn't it?
You've got a really good story, and that whole process also is designed to wear you down to the point where you're so sleep deprived and desperately grateful for anything at all that you're on side, really, aren't you? You're just, utterly controlled.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. My youth again. So my brother, the story about our family. Do you know?
Right, we know that your mum and dad briefly joined a sort of kind of commune, a cult, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't brief. I mean, my father is still a member. So
is he?
Yeah, it hasn't. So
and am I right in thinking that, because I've read your book, that was caused bizarrely by a bout of food poisoning?
Well, that's right. So it was. We were, like I said before, we were a very normal suburban family.
Yeah.
And when I was 12, my father joined a group called the Brahma Kumaris, which is a kind of Indian spiritual group that believe that in a 5,000-year cycle of time. And so you have a sort of apocalypse, rebuilding, and then a new golden age. And it's all based on a very ascetic lifestyle. So from being this kind of quite yuppie-ish, sort of upwardly mobile couple and family, suddenly we was like, there would be, I'd come back from BMXing and there'd be sort of 30 people meditating in white robes in the living room, and this kind of stuff. So it all changed. Anyway, my brother, I think, kind of handled it better than me. He was 2 years older and he was already sort of off, he's discovering young life, being a teenager. But I really felt I'd sort of lost my dad. It was really hard. And I think my parents, seeing that I was kind of struggling, they sent me to what was a brilliant sort of very kind of hippie-ish boarding school called Frencham. Have you heard of Summerhill?
Yes. Oh yeah.
A little bit like Summerhill. You did have to get lessons.
It's Frencham Heights.
Frencham Heights, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very. I'm born just around the corner from there. Yeah.
Okay, so
I know it's a really progressive school.
Yeah, and I loved it. And when I went there, my brother made me a tape. So I'd be 13, 14 when I went. And my brother made me this tape, a cassette, a compilation tape. And here we've got
lovely
King Kurt, The Cramps, Susie and the Banshees, The Cure, Adam and the Ants, what else? A few other ones, the New York Dolls, Buzzcocks. So all great stuff. And that was my kind of introduction. And then I remember it became a talking point because, the sixth formers would know who these people were. And I got a little bit of cachet from that.
All right.
Yeah.
So that kind of, even though I was actually a late developer, I probably, I don't think my voice broke until I was, almost 15. But it sort of gave me a little intro into the cool world of alternative music.
Was it the case when you're at a boarding school? Was it the case when people came back from their holidays, whatever? What you wanted to know is what albums people had got. Did you have any of that kind of thing?
Yeah, there's that kind of stuff going on. And I remember one guy. Now I really appreciate it, but at the time I think we sort of slightly ribbed him for it. He was really into all the sort of electronic stuff that was coming out at the time. The very avant-garde kind of rather boffin-like, Duritty column and all these sorts of people, quite kind of clever clogsy. And one guy, there's one guy, and this isn't remarkable. Everybody loves the Beatles. I love the Beatles. There's one guy who's obsessed with the Beatles, and we thought it was really uncool.
Yeah.
I mean, this was the 80s,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm ashamed of that now.
Well, they were really unfashionable then.
Nobody talked about them for years.
We did a piece in Q about the 20th anniversary of Sergeant. It was 20 years ago today. People thought we were mad.
Yeah, don't they?
You know why? They're absolutely dead in the water.
Dead in the water.
Yeah.
It changed. I remember when I was about 16, again, I was getting into all the 60s stuff, and I met these mods, and we're talking about the favorite records and everything. And I said, well, yeah, I love Odyssey and Oracle by the Zombies, and I got into Syd Barrett and, you know, all these different things. And one guy said, well, the two best albums ever made are Rubber Soul and Revolver. And I went, oh, really? He said, yeah, go back and listen to them. He said, that's the perfect meeting of modern psychedelia. And of course, he was right. You know, I went back and listened to Norwegian Wood and all those songs. And they're just absolutely amazing and so clever, so charming, and really smart. You know, you just feel that these were people who are kind of looking at everything that was going on at the time and making the most of it. So it took me a while, and you know, and that makes me realize, and this is something I think I've been thinking about a lot, because I've been doing this book on kind of it's a social history of 70s Britain through the mainstream pop. And what I've been thinking about through doing that is the nature of credibility.
Yes.
You know, what credibility is. So, you know, for example, I interviewed Jonathan King, and he said that when he started, you know, when he did Everyone's Gone to the Moon, for a very brief period, he was seen as credible. And then he said everyone saw through me and saw that I was a big superficial queen, and, you know, that was the end of that. But, you know, for a moment, and I was thinking, the thing about credibility is that it's image-based. You know, we think that credibility is based on quality of music, but it's not.
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. There's a really interesting clip I was sent to Mark the other day. There's a clip from, I think it's Nationwide or BBC Television. In 1970, Led Zeppelin won the Melody Maker band poll, readers poll. And so Nationwide greeted this as, this is a major change. Because look at these guys.
Beatles.
They're hairy and they're kind of odd, and they play for long periods of time. And they have this this studio discussion about how has real music replaced pop music.
You say
you just think it's so
the
wrong.
cult of personality is over. The whole thing about the Beatles is people kind of interested, but with Led Zeppelin, it's nothing to do with image. It's to do with music. This could not be less true. Really.
It's completely to do with image.
Absolutely.
It's to do with music as well, but it's, you know.
It's so true. It's so true. And this is what's really fascinated me. I mean, I've been kind of, you know, I've been going through all of this stuff. I mean, I'm really going deep. I mean, I'm starting with Clive Dunn's granddad.
There you go, 1971.
Yeah, exactly. And then and the person who really fascinates me, and we mentioned him earlier on, is Mark Bolan, because Bolan had, you know, you're saying about Simon Napier Bell saying that, you know, he discovered the Incredible String Band, and, you know, he's sitting on you know, reading you know, The Prophet, and you know, smoking the pipes of peace or whatever. But of course, after that, what I found really fascinating was when his PR, Chilita Segunda, put a little bit of glitter on his cheeks, and he went to Anello and David and bought these sort of, you know, women's court shoes, and I think he went to a shop called Alcasura on the King's Road and started, you know, and realised that there's a whole generation of kids out there who would buy 45s, and one of the genius things that he did. And it sounds so basic, but it was absolutely genius. He put 2 songs on the B-side.
Yes, that's true. He did.
That's better value for money.
It is.
Yeah.
You can't afford this stuff, you know. And suddenly, Hot Love, and actually, Ride a White Swan was the key, because Ride a White Swan was in a chart battle for the #1 with Grandad. Both of them lost, I think, to You Hear Me Knocking by Dave Edmunds in the end. But it was that period when Bolan, who's a very smart guy, understood that the underground, of which he'd been a part of, Heavy Jelly and Juicy Lucy, was, you know, that was no longer.
No, absolutely.
It was a dead end. It wasn't going anywhere, you know. And so and I thought that was just an absolute genius. And so, and you could probably, you'll probably know this much better than I do. But when I've been going through all of the magazines and stuff, it seems that Bolan was seen as a bit of a sellout. For those
Completely.
I went to a festival in 1971, I think. Where he was pelted with bottles and unsavory objects because 20 minutes ago, he'd been in Tyrannosaurus Rex, sitting cross-legged on a rug. You know what I mean? With bongos being tapped all around him, and now he was making this music for 14-year-old girls, and people couldn't deal with it.
And it was very apparent. It wasn't,
Complete loss of
it's like Will
credibility.
says, it wasn't even 14-year-olds; it was 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Because that's what Mark Bolan did at that point. Was he vaulted over to, all right, I'm going over to the junior school playground here because there's a coming generation here, and they're not interested in the Beatles and all the stuff that you're bothered about and Woodstock. They want this stuff, and he did it enormously successfully. David Bowie kind of did it, but still kept one foot in the old camp. So, people didn't accuse David Bowie of being a sellout at all, whereas they did definitely with Mark Bolan. But people like John Peel was in the forefront of it, wasn't he? Because
Peel abandoned it. Peel very publicly sort of declared his abhorrence for the whole thing, didn't he? He felt let down. He felt he'd helped launch him, and now this.
Definitely. I mean, but when you get to, where is it? I can't find it now. I was going to dig out Electric Warrior, but Electric Warrior, what an incredible album, and that was really the one when it went into pop. Songs like Life's a Gas, performing Life's a Gas on television with Cilla Black, amazing. Yes. So that's the sort of world which I've been immersed in. And
so what's the book called, and when's it coming out?
Well, it's not coming out until autumn. I'm still writing it.
Right.
It's called In Perfect Harmony, Singalong Pop in 70s Britain. So it's kind of looking at all the things that happen. So everything.
That's a good idea.
Really good idea.
Europe, so for example, one of the things I found is, when Ted Heath's big dream of Europe, it coincided with the rise of the package holiday. It just wasn't possible for working class people to go abroad before, and suddenly you could, and Franco, was trying to, because, under a dictatorship, he was, the economy was strangled. So he was encouraging all this tourism. Benidorm exploded. And then suddenly you had Una Paloma Blanca and Viva España as a product of people coming home. And, so it's all that sort of stuff. It's like the 3-day week. I think that Merry Christmas Everybody by Slade was a triumph of the 3-day week because it was so fun and celebratory and, simple. And this is a terrible time for so many people. It was just when 3-day week hit. So, you can kind of see. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. And I mean, digging out, this, David, I think this is, haven't you got something to do?
No, I used to read it. I used to read it devotedly. Let It Rock. Yes.
I mean, this has got a great interview by Lester Bangs.
Right.
Played, where
what date is that? 73?
October 73.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So he's celebrating them. And I think at a time again when, if you were from the underground, you probably looked down on Slade. I don't know, but they were probably seeing.
Oh yeah. They did.
You did. Oh yeah, they were tacky and.
And also they then became. There was kind of the top of the box world, and there was the whistle test world, and they were
cartoonish,
worlds,
Yeah,
and the Supersonic world with Mike Mansfield.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who I'm speaking to next week. So that's.
Oh, at least sounds like fun. I'm looking forward to.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, I'm in the thick of it, and it's kind of, what it's like with a book. You just don't know, but it's one torture after another. Especially, I think the worst day in an author's life is the day the book is published.
Oh God!
No, actually,
the feeling of exposure, the kind of naked feeling. There's no going back.
All these people post these things on social media. I've just got my copies from the publisher unboxed. I feel about that. I feel the same nausea I used to feel when you got a first issue of a magazine back from the printer, which is
howling legal
in it, howling error that I haven't noticed until the day it arrives printed.
I'll ask you a question, both of you. Have you, from the magazine world, was there ever a time, when your heart absolutely sinks, and you're thinking, I wonder if there's a large hole in the ground that I can jump into, and I just stay in there until it blows over. Can you think of one like where the lawyers have been coming after you, or where it's just been, you've had the phone call from Elton John's PR or whatever, that it's just been the really terrifying moment.
Oh, I can't think of what
God, I
this
can
terrifying.
remember taking out illegal. It was something I was going to say about Tina Turner and use of computers on stage, synclaviers that would allow you to not to have to sing live. I can remember having this conversation with her manager and him using the most chilling expression. He said, "Publish that, and you will feel the full force of a major lawsuit." I can just remember that big unnecessarily long sentence, the full force of, you know.
Yes.
And I can remember thinking I might not publish that, but no, after the event, I don't know, when after something came out. What do you think, Dave? You remember?
Oh, I can think of loads of tiny little things that still cause me, the memory of which still calls me to, as we say, snap into the fetal position under the duvet, in the middle of the night. Thinking,
well, legal action, Scott. We
later.
were sued by so many people. Billy
Well,
Idol,
there weren't
Morrissey.
that many.
There were a few.
Yeah, Billy Idol was just. I mean, the interesting
fun.
thing about legal stuff in the music industry and the music media is it hardly ever gets anywhere near a court. It's just saber rattling on the part of somebody, you know, to try and frighten somebody else. The cases that actually go to the court, very few and far between, aren't they? Really?
Yeah.
Because you know, wiser counsels, you know, prevail.
Will, this has been fantastic. It's so interesting. Now, what we normally do, what we traditionally end with, is people's nomination for the greatest record ever made, single or album. And you told me before that you confidently know that you have the answer. So come on, let's see it.
I've got it right here.
Oh, good. You've met her.
Because we're dying to know the answer. You know, this has been puzzling us.
Because I'll have
for
to make sure
years,
to get
all our
it.
lives. Yeah.
We get a piece of paper to write it down.
I've got the answer to you right here. Here it is. This is the greatest album.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, right.
This
Not one of Dave's favourites. I adore that record.
Oh, I know. I absolutely love it. I mean,
and more again. Did you go to the concert in the South Bank when he came back?
Yeah, wonderful. It was just
wasn't it incredible?
Yeah, I mean, I'd seen him a few times. I saw him before he went to jail, and then when he came out.
Yeah.
Initially, when he came, actually before he went to jail, it was tiny. I saw him. Do you remember the George Roby?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, that was how low his stock was, and he had a really good band. Yeah, a young band. Yeah. And then he did the Queen Elizabeth Hall one where he did Forever Changes in full with a little chamber orchestra, and it was just fantastic. It was magical. But to me, it's, you know, I was saying earlier on when, you know, in the 80s, it was, I hated the mainstream music in the 80s. It was, you know, to me, it just seemed like living in a box by living in a box, you know. And so I got into, you know, the 60s stuff. I mean, especially Stones. Beggar's Banquet was a huge record for me. But Forever Changes, when I discovered it, that it seemed like the perfect band to me, because they came out of that, they had that kind of garage thing for the first two albums. You know, they did, you know, My Little Red Book and 7 and 7 Is and stuff. And then this was 67, which is the golden year for me. And there was it just felt like it felt like a spiritual album. You know, it felt like it touched, and perhaps because of my father getting into his whole spirituality thing, which I could never quite connect with. Yeah. At the same time, I was quite fascinated by. It really went to another dimension, and it still does. And actually, when we got married, my wife came down the aisle to Alone. I'm going to get emotional now. Yeah. She came down the aisle to Alone Again All, which is like the fantastic song, absolute masterpiece. But then what was meant to her name is Nicola Jane, and then it was meant to be Lady Jane by the Rolling Stones. Yeah. But by some terrible disaster, the DJ put on Under My Thumb instead.
Oh no!
And it's like, oh my God, how does this look to her parents?
Oh no!
Yeah. So the magic was killed a little bit.
So let that be a lesson to anybody.
Fantastic story.
Planning music for their
get
wedding.
out of that. Must have been a very quiet reception. All of her friends must have stormed out, thrown meringues at you, and then spun on their heels and left.
That's brilliant.
Especially after, you know, the glory of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
This just seemed like a joke.
Oh,
that's
man.
So funny.
That's really good.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Fantastic, Will.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.